So we're going to start first of all with video editing. And I'm going to talk about a lot of interesting stuff about this, I hope, because I noticed that the art of video editing itself has kind of been lost in a sense. I'm exaggerating, but with the advent of social media and all sorts of new applications and mobile applications that make creating videos very easy, it's been awesome for so many content creators and people who don't know so much to be able to make videos, and I'm all for it, and I'm totally cool about that. But there are some things lost in the mix, if you know what I mean, that, newer people, and also new things that have been developed, and trends, and ways of editing and doing things that have been kind of innovated and created that weren't considered normal before as well. Because, a main reason to learn the rules is sometimes to break them in the right ways. And see, sometimes you could try to break the rules before you know them, but it won't really have the same kind of impact or effect. So one of these things is jump cuts. But anyway, let's assume that you don't really know too much about video editing. I want to give you a general rundown to give you some theories. There's a lot of technical aspects, but we're going to talk about more general concepts. So first of all, this is a term that's also found in programming and development. There is source in and source out. So you always have to remember that no matter how good of an editor you are, it really does matter, your source footage and so on. Now, when you get to a certain level, and if you're doing it for certain purposes, and you know a lot about what it might not actually matter as much, or you can find ways to work it. But what I mean by that, source in, source out, is if the demand of the client or of your company is for something of a certain stature or quality or fidelity in particular, and your source material is just not up to par, unless you're going to do something really fancy that is probably not good in terms of cost performance, in that it might be too expensive or time consuming or energy consuming to do it properly. Or just take a lot of time for a computer application that's meant to do that, or some kind of process. You want to just have that higher quality source. And if you're serious, or your company's serious, or your client's serious, and they want those kind of results, like I want a 1080p 60 frames per second video that's sharp, and high quality and professional, like something like that. I mean, nowadays you don't really need to have that kind of fidelity and so on, but I'm just talking about the principle here. It depends on the kind of video as well. If you want to shoot a high quality film that's going to be played in a movie theater, you don't want to shoot it on your camera in most cases. I don't want to leave all exceptions out, but you know what I mean. So remember that, source in, source out. So that's one thing. Another thing is, it's all storytelling. Okay, so it's if you don't have a story, if you don't know what the beginning, middle, end is, if you don't know what the point of it, the message, what you're trying to say, it's going to be hard to put together in a sensible way. Okay, I mean, you might have some really good video editing skills and not really have a story to begin with and make a good video, but that's because you know how to tell a story even when there isn't really a clear one there. So either way, whether you know it in advance or whether you're creating it on the spot, you want to be telling a story, and that's so crucial to video editing. Another thing about video editing, you want to be able to balance between different kinds of cuts, and you need to know in general the cuts. And the funny thing, a lot of people are just learning as they go these days, but there's actual specific terms and different kinds of cuts you can use. Okay, there's, as you may have heard, there's the close-up. That's really just, sort of the head in there. There's a middle shot, which is kind of like a shot like this. Then you have a long shot, you can see my whole body. Then there's the ultra close-up, which is where you maybe you'd only see my eye or something like that, or only my nostril or something. Then there's the over the shoulder, going over the shoulder. You can make sure to write notes so that you're getting all of this. And then there's over the head. Of course, there's taking the shots from lower ground, so you get more of the wide picture. There's landscape shots and so on. So there's a lot of these shots. I mean, people figure this out as they go, but it's kind of good sometimes to know these things in advance, so that you kind of have a palette to work with when you're editing. Now, for simple videos like this, you might not need that many shots, that much editing. These kind of videos are more content oriented. But let's say you're doing something more dramatic, or you're trying to tell a more in-depth story, make it more cinematic, then you're going to want to consider all of these things. Another thing about shots when recording is making sure that the shots are smooth and not shaky, as that can bring a lot of problems in your video editing. Once again, if it's a more casual video or you're trying to give it a more realistic effect, and sometimes it's used for effect, like I said, there's exceptions, but in general you want to have it smooth. You might want to use a tripod, you might want to use a Steadicam, or just have it placed somewhere for each camera, just because it's can take and record motion. This is something people get confused with. They think, oh, the cameras can move, let's make a move, let's pan and zoom and do all sorts of funky stuff. You'll figure out, perhaps, hopefully you'll figure out that actually sometimes it's good just to have your camera in one place and use instead multiple cameras and then just record. Or if you don't have multiple cameras, record, different takes from different angles with the camera just still in one place. Because the movement's happening inside the video. You don't have to make the camera move all the time. Now, of course, if you're getting Hollywood on it and you want to have, the camera sweeping from above and so on, but then you have to make sure it's smooth. If you don't have the equipment, you have to make sure it's done properly. And that's the key, is smoothness. And that's why you don't want to get too fancy with the camera. Because what happens is you get a lot of blurring, you're losing focus, you have to refocus, all kinds of things like that. And that's another thing, focus. Make sure you know about focus, make sure you know the settings of the camera, or whoever is operating the camera. If you're purely just the video editor, you're not the videographer as well, make sure they know about things like that. They know their camera well and they know how to use it, whether it's automatic or manual. They know about the f-stop, they know about the aperture, they know about the white level, they know about the zoom, and they know about the focus. So that's really important. Okay. So another thing about video editing, still at the recording stage here, is lighting. Now, you may have heard that even if your camera itself is of low quality or low fidelity, if you have excellent lighting, it can still look good. And that's just to show you just how important light is. What changes in general, like what's the biggest difference between a professional camera and a more, consumer-based camera? Besides all the bells and whistles and, sturdiness and build quality and all that stuff, it's the amount of light that the lens can take in, right? That is the biggest thing. It's all light driven. So if you have really, really good lighting, like things are really well lit, and I don't mean overexposed to the extreme, like it can be pretty well lit, maybe a little overexposed, a little bit, but not a lot. Because, and that's a tip I'll bring up a little later. But if you have that proper lighting, you can come up with a really nice video, even without the best camera. So pay attention to lighting. It's a huge, huge tip. If you only have, let's say, $500 and you want to get some new equipment, and you have the choice between a $500 camera or a $500 lighting kit, go for the lighting kit. You might not have to spend that much, but I'm just giving you a total example. Like there might be a case where you can just use some regular lights, but you just have to know what you're doing with the lights and know that they're so important, and in fact more important than the camera. If you're going to prioritize one, prioritize the lights. And then finally, another thing I want to go over with the basics, the more theoretical stuff and the sort of pre-production aspects of video editing, is storyboarding. And this is an interesting one because it's kind of a debate. Some people think, you don't need a storyboard. Only amateurs, storyboard. Some people in Hollywood or in Hollywood North. I've been out there before for a few years, and I've also worked with some people from LA and all that stuff, who've worked for Warner Brothers and all that. There's different views on it, but the argument for people who say no storyboard is that if you're good enough, you can actually make most of this current live situation that you could never have imagined in your storyboard. So why would you storyboard when you miss out on the opportunities and you try to be, forcing your scene too much? But then there's the whole other perspective that if you don't have that guideline, you don't have that story, it can be a mess and you can waste a lot of footage, a lot of time, and a lot of effort. So obviously, as many things where there's an argument like that, usually there's something good from both sides, and you can apply that to almost any major debate. And so you want to take the best from both sides. And so I suggest you do storyboard. It doesn't have to be a perfect comic book graphic novel. I mean, you could do it that way if that's your thing and you're able to sustain or manage that kind of thing over the long term. Like you want to make it like The Matrix, but you don't have to. Stick figures will do. You can do it really, really simple. But it's good to have it there. It's good to have a storyboard. I know as people say, but have your storyboard, make your storyboard. But then when you're doing the thing, don't be so tied to the storyboard. Don't be so strict to the storyboard. The storyboard's a guideline. It's a blueprint. You know, if you can't do any better than what's exactly on the storyboard on the set, then at least you could do as good as what your story. At least you planned it out. But you definitely don't want to do worse, right? Which might happen if you don't have a storyboard. And absolutely, you want to be open-minded and ready to even do better than what's in the storyboard, to maybe capture something that's spontaneous or natural, whether it be from the actors or the scene or whatever the phenomenon that's going on that you're recording. Be open to something spontaneous that maybe might make things even better, enhance things, or improve on your story. Doesn't mean you can't make good videos, don't get me wrong, but there's definitely going to be an advantage of two people who, you know, both were doing it on their own and got good, and then one who knew about this stuff and one who didn't. You know, either way, you're still going to have to innovate and think outside of the box, but why not have more tools, right, to make you even better right from the start? So anyway, I'll check you out with the next video. See you later. Bye now.